In a grocery store, a boy picked up a bag of chips from the shelf, but it turned out the bag was already open. As he tried to collect the chips from the floor, another child asked if he was trying to steal them, but he said no. Suddenly, a breaking news alert on the TV announced a small earthquake that was getting worse. The store's floor started shaking, causing panic among the people. Then, the ground in front of the store cracked open, sending rocks and sand tumbling down on everyone, filling the store with screams. The boy shielded the child next to him. After things settled down, they checked on each other's safety. When the boy stood up, the child noticed something strange behind him. She pointed, and the boy turned to see a massive tower rising from the ground in the city. This strange tower didn't just appear in their city. It popped up in cities around the world, like England and Japan. These towers were called the Towers of Nightmare. They started choosing people to enter and become tower walkers. Those who agreed were transported to a battlefield, where they received tools and powers like in a video game. However, as they spent more time inside the tower, they came to a sudden realization: this was no game. Instead, they were faced with a massive screen showing what was happening just outside the tower, a rescue operation underway, and a notification warning them that the tower was about to impact something significant. Outside the tower, a team of rescue workers was busy clearing the area. Suddenly, one of them noticed something strange inside the tower and alerted their colleagues. They weren't sure if it was a human or some kind of monstrous creature, so they decided to call the police. Then, out of nowhere, this creature clenched its fists and revealed its sharp teeth by opening its mouth. In an instant, the creature let out a piercing cry, and a horde of monsters poured out of the tower onto the Earth's surface, causing a catastrophic event now known as the Great Disaster. Alarm bells began ringing, signaling an emergency, and people scattered in all directions, desperately trying to save themselves. The military was called in to deal with this unexpected attack. They used tanks and heavy weapons to try and fight the monsters. However, these creatures were so massive and powerful that they wiped out the entire military force almost instantly. This resulted in widespread destruction, and a third of the world's population was wiped out. Inside the tower, there was nothing they could do but watch the devastation unfold. After the disaster, they received a notification that they had been chosen as tower walkers, the only hope to save the world from further destruction. With the possibility of saving the world in mind, they decided to climb the tower, hoping that clearing it would end this nightmare. In this way, people with special powers and unique abilities became humanity's last chance. To achieve their goal, the tower walkers started ascending the tower, floor by floor. After a few floors, they encountered a massive stone blocking their way to the next level, leaving them to wonder if they could progress any further. They thought about destroying the stone but decided that using force wouldn't be effective. Despite this, they attempted to do so with their weapons. However, when they started hitting the stone, it unexpectedly broke into small, shining pieces, leaving them puzzled. The system then explained that it was a regression stone, capable of sending them back to the time they were initially brought here while keeping their memories intact. Considering it an amazing discovery, the leader of the tower walkers took hold of it and said he'd try it on himself and report back. As he activated the stone, a bright light surrounded him, forcing the others to shield their eyes. After a while, when they looked again, they were shocked to see that their leader had truly disappeared. With their leader gone, the rest of the team wondered if he could ever return to the tower. At that moment, one of their members, a former science professor, suggested that things in the tower might be more complicated than they thought. He explained that their leader had gone back to the past of this world, but because of some timeline split, he might not be able to meet them again. He backed up his argument with popular theories like the multiverse and parallel universes, showing that their situation resulted from a split in the timeline of the universe. In simpler terms, he meant that their leader, by going back in time, had become a completely different person from the leader they knew. Upon hearing this, the other team members struggled to believe it, prompting him to realize they needed a simpler explanation. In plain language, he clarified that their leader had gone back in time, but that wouldn't change anything in their world. He believed that, based on what he knew, the items in the tower possessed such extraordinary powers. Holding the regression stone, he explained that it would send all of them to a world with a split timeline, but they might not all end up in the same split timeline. He was convinced that the tower's contents defied common human understanding. Meanwhile, outside the tower, the second tower impact occurred, leading to another deadly attack by monsters that further devastated humanity. The walkers faced a critical choice as Earth's human population neared extinction. They had to decide whether to use regression stones to go back in time for their own survival or to stay and fight in the tower until the end. At first, they bravely battled the monsters, but it became clear they were outmatched. They started using regression stones one by one, returning to the past. Eventually, only one walker remained in the tower, abandoned by the others who thought there was no hope. Feeling hopeless, the last walker sat in front of a powerful monster, ready to be consumed. Suddenly, a strong person appeared and defeated the monster in an instant. The newcomer asked if the walker was okay, and they nodded. Then, a group of powerful individuals approached, led by the person who had saved the walker. They praised the walker for holding on until the end. Realizing these people were their last hope, the walker used a regression stone and went back in time, believing that such strong individuals wouldn't be tempted to use the stones. After the walker disappeared, the captain of the group told the others to keep going, leading humanity's last, determined squad called the Carpe Diem. Despite their strength and determination, the squad was eventually defeated, and its members were in near-death states. As the captain lay pinned beneath rubble, he wondered where they had gone wrong. He remembered a recent battle where a giant scarecrow-like monster had attacked. The captain, Jae-hwan, had attacked from behind, cutting off its head with his sword while Yoon-hwan, his friend, had used his weapons to destroy the rest of its body. After vanquishing the monster, he turned to Yoon-hwan and asked if there were any casualties. Yoon-hwan reassured him that everyone was okay, and the wounded squad members just needed some rest to recover. They all looked at their fellow team members and, feeling hopeful, Yoon-hwan remarked that if they kept going like this, they might make it to the final floor. Their team members happily waved in agreement. While waving back, Jae-hwan suddenly noticed a remarkable sword on the ground. It was a sun and moon imbued suppression dragon sword, forged over 1,000 days by the 85th floor master to kill a dragon. Jae-hwan felt a rush of excitement at having such a powerful weapon. He thought, like Yoon-hwan had said, that they were on the right track to reach the final floor soon. Until that moment, Jae-hwan had believed that luck was on their side. However, when they reached the Chamber of Purgatory on the 98th floor, they faced an overwhelmingly powerful monster. This creature spewed molten lava and seriously injured all his comrades, melting their weapons. As he watched his squad's dire situation, the monster threw him against a wall, causing immense pain. As he began to lose consciousness, Jae-hwan wondered if it was all in vain. He thought about his team members and his friend Yoon-hwan, and questioned if their shared experiences were meant to end like this. Just then, the monster prepared to unleash a stream of lava. But before it could do so, Yoon-hwan suddenly appeared and attacked the monster, causing it intense agony. Yoon-hwan urged Jae-hwan to stay focused, then landed on the monster's body and tried to hold it down, admitting he couldn't defeat it alone. In response, the monster turned its fury toward Yoon-hwan, leaving Jae-hwan stunned. After a tense moment, Yoon-hwan dropped his weapons and clung to the monster's sharp horn, perilously close to being consumed. Shocked and worried for Yoon-hwan, Jae-hwan called out, but before he could fully regain his senses, the monster abruptly turned and rammed its horn into the opposite wall. Seeing this, Jae-hwan was overwhelmed by anger. He got up, grabbed the sword, and charged at the monster with a fierce determination in his eyes. Feeling a sudden movement behind it, the monster turned around. But before it could react, Jae-hwan rushed toward it with incredible speed and launched an attack. After a while, the monster lay in pieces on the ground, with molten lava flowing from its shattered body. Struggling to catch his breath, Jae-hwan turned to Yoon-hwan and told him to continue. However, Yoon-hwan was on the ground, badly hurt, holding a regression stone. Seeing this, Jae-hwan asked him what he was doing, and Yoon-hwan apologized. Jae-hwan remembered Yoon-hwan as someone who always smiled, even in this dangerous tower. That's why everyone called him the Smile Knight among the tower walkers. Realizing that the Smile Knight had lost his smile for the first time, Jae-hwan turned away, telling him to use the regression stone before he changed his mind. With that, he started to walk away, leaving Yoon-hwan behind. Looking at Jae-hwan, Yoon-hwan wondered if Jae-hwan had figured out his plan. He glanced at the bloodstained stone in his hand, commenting that it looked rather worn. However, Yoon-hwan had a change of heart and began to climb the stairs, thinking that Jae-hwan was even more impressive than he thought and that he could reach the top floor of the tower. Despite his serious injuries, Yoon-hwan was determined to keep moving, believing that someone like Jae-hwan could make it. Standing by a window, he expressed relief at having Jae-hwan in this world and then jumped out. Meanwhile, Jae-hwan reached the entrance to the 99th floor and was about to open the door when leaves started falling on him. These leaves signaled what his friend had done, causing Jaehwan to pause for a moment. He then said they should continue forward together. With determination, he opened the door to the 99th floor and was surprised to find a snowy landscape in front of him. This made him realize that the challenges ahead would be very different. As he entered the snowy area, Jaehwan started moving forward, feeling the cold and exhaustion. Suddenly, sharp spikes of ice began to emerge from the ground, forcing Jaehwan to run to avoid them. While he was running away, enduring a great deal of pain, a dragon-like ice monster emerged from the ground and asked if he had given up. Despite his injuries from the snow spikes, Jaehwan stood before it, smiling, and asked if the monster was tired from their fight. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the snowy landscape, signaling the start of a fierce battle between Jaehwan and the monster. After some time, Jaehwan hid beneath the frozen bodies of gigantic monsters, muffling his breath with a piece of cloth to remain silent. Meanwhile, the monsters searched for him, playfully asking if they were playing hide and seek. As he remained still, Jaehwan realized that it had been a decade since he had reached the 99th floor. While applying medicine to his injured hand, he thought about the challenges he had faced on the 98th floor, acknowledging that the danger on this floor was unlike anything he had encountered before. His injuries caused him immense pain, and he knew that the 99th floor boss, the Ice Dragon, possessed a breath that came from the Forgotten Land. This breath was nearly impossible to withstand, even with the highest level of cold resistance. He believed that the only reason he had survived for so long was the equipment left behind by the walkers who had regressed. He remembered the dragon's sword of suppression he had found on the 85th floor and the ice demon armor given to him by Yunhuan. Looking at the Flame King's bracelet given to him by his friend Han Seal, Jaehwan closed his eyes and missed them all. Remembering Seal, he silently apologized for not being able to save her and wished he had been stronger. Just then, someone called out to him, and he was shocked. He found himself in a memory where a blacksmith asked if he was thinking of challenging the tower again, and Jaehwan agreed, stating that he felt he could conquer the tower this time. The blacksmith, Jae, belonged to Oedipu's village, which had been reclaimed after defeating the boss on the 50th floor, Altamyanus. Despite the constant influx of injured or dead walkers, the people in the area remained hopeful. The priests organized rescue teams to help walkers who couldn't fight anymore. Meanwhile, blacksmiths in the workshops made gear for walkers who continued to battle for humanity, offering it for free. Looking at Jaehwan noted that he might be the last blacksmith in Oedipus. Jae, in response, discouraged Jaehwan from dwelling on this fact. He pointed out that Jaehwan was his only customer, and supplies from the lower floors were scarce nowadays. Jaehwan understood this, as there were very few living humans left in the tower to send supplies. While Jaehwan didn't know the current year, he remembered at least 10 tower impacts and that new people weren't being invited into the tower anymore. Thinking about this, he asked Jae if humans had completely disappeared from Earth. After a short silence, Jae asked Jaehwan if he ever got tired of going up and down the tower repeatedly. Jaehwan remembered a strange message on the wall near the regression stone, "Tower within the tower, a nightmare within a nightmare." Not sure of its meaning and thinking someone else might have written it, Jaehwan scratched his head and said there was nothing special inside. Jae then mentioned that Grandma Hyline had disappeared 2 days ago, which surprised Jaehwan. He believed people could only vanish from the tower by going back in time or by jumping off it. Knowing that Hyline, a skilled potion maker, and Jae, a talented blacksmith, were among the few support walkers left, Jaehwan turned to Jae and asked him to teach him blacksmithing, leaving Jae shocked. Thinking back on his conversation with Jae, Jaehwan left his hiding place and confidently faced the ice dragon when it asked if he was done playing hide and seek. The dragon acknowledged that no human had ever reached the 99th floor alone since the tower's creation, recognizing Jaehwan as an extraordinary human. Jaehwan continued to smile confidently. Jaehwan had a shocking realization: the creature before him was no human but a monstrous beast. Slowly, he opened his eyes and turned to face the massive dragon. He mustered the courage to speak, saying he'd feel a deep emptiness after defeating such a fearsome opponent. The dragon responded with a wry smile, claiming Jaehwan's goal was impossible. Ignoring the dragon's skepticism, Jaehwan drew his sword, suggesting the dragon wasn't as invulnerable as it thought. He boldly stated that even the dragon's supposedly impenetrable icy armor had started to crack. In response, the dragon called him arrogant, and then unleashed a deadly breath attack, aiming it directly at Jaehwan. Fearlessly, Jaehwan ran toward the impending danger. After a relentless battle in the snowy field, Jae-hwan lay in the snow, his body covered in wounds and blood. The dragon stood over him, mocking his determination to fight to the end. The dragon foretold Jae-hwan's ultimate fate of overwhelming solitude and nothingness. Suddenly, the snow spikes that held Jae-hwan transformed into the shapes of his fallen comrades, embracing him and calling his name. In a moment of defiance, Jae-hwan addressed the dragon, opened his eyes, and chided it for talking too much. With determination, he shattered the snow spikes and charged at the bewildered dragon with his sword. The dragon urged Jae-hwan to give up, claiming his skills weren't sufficient to defeat it. However, Jae-hwan remembered that he'd started his tower raid later than others, missing out on hidden skills and classes. As a result, he had focused solely on perfecting the thrust skill, practicing it tirelessly. He had killed over 50 million monsters with it, and it had become a powerful attack rivaling hidden skills, without draining his spirit power. But facing the formidable ice dragon, he knew the battle would be tough. Over 100 thrusts had barely left a scratch on its body. Suddenly, the dragon opened its mouth, preparing a powerful breath attack. Jae-hwan realized it was too late to dodge. Then he noticed a familiar light emanating from the dragon, just as he'd seen on the 98th floor. He saw this as his chance. Jae-hwan gripped his sword tightly and charged at the dragon with all his might, inflicting a fatal blow. As he landed on the ground, he looked at the dragon. Its lower jaw hung loose, one side of its face completely destroyed, yet it seethed with anger. Jae-hwan smiled, saying his attacks hadn't been enough. He should have obliterated the dragon's chin. In response, the dragon unfurled huge icy wings and warned Jae-hwan not to get carried away after just one strike. The dragon had grown even more powerful and took to the skies, declaring its intent to finish off Jae-hwan this time. It unleashed a powerful breath that forced Jae-hwan to dodge hastily, filled with anxiety at the thought that he might not win if the battle continued this way. Then, unexpectedly, the dragon landed in front of Jae-hwan, calling him an unfortunate human. It mentioned that if there were 10 more humans like Jae-hwan, they might have had a chance to defeat it. The dragon also revealed that their fate would have been different if its race hadn't been fooled by the Dream Demon's stone, which left Jae-hwan puzzled. Confused about this stone, Jae-hwan asked for more information. However, instead of answering, the dragon raised its claw to strike him. Jae-hwan managed to evade the attack and fled the snowy battlefield. Safely outside, he closed the door behind him, realizing that the dragon's last attack could have killed him. As Jae-hwan rested against the door, he reflected on the dragon's words about the Dream Demon's stone. 5 years later, Jae-hwan achieved the seemingly impossible. He defeated the ice dragon and reached the 99th floor. This victory greatly enhanced his strength, stamina, skills, martial abilities, and dexterity. Sitting beside the ice dragon's lifeless body, Jae-hwan reviewed the notifications on his device. He then turned to the dying dragon and asked about the Dream Demon's stone. The dragon cryptically replied that Jae-hwan already possessed the answers and that he would learn everything on the final floor. At that moment, a unique sword descended from the dragon's body, covered in its blood, the ice dragon's sword infused with its icy breath. As Jae-hwan held the peculiar-looking sword, he couldn't help but think it looked more like a dagger. Suddenly, the dragon's spilled blood on the snow formed a door in front of him, leading him to the ultimate floor. Determined to conquer the tower, Jae-hwan entered the portal. The inscription on the door changed from 100 to Control Room. Moments after entering the door, Jae-hwan emerged on the other side, greeted by a shocking sight, countless screens displaying himself, Jae, Hylene, Adipose, and his village. He stared at the screens, contemplating whether this represented the current appearance of the tower. His focus shifted between the summoning area and his village. Lost in thought, a voice suddenly broke in, expressing surprise that he had arrived here first, while they had expected him to head to town. Startled, he spun around, his hand gripping his sword tightly. However, there was no one to be seen. The voice quickly reassured him, admitting they had forgotten to deliver an important message. At that very moment, Jae-hwan received a notification, congratulating him for being the first to clear the tutorial game of World 294. Reading it, Jae-hwan was overwhelmed with shock and confusion. Suddenly, the blood of all the people who had died in the tower began to fill the room, transforming into a strange, water-like substance, intensifying his shock. The invisible being that had been conversing with him stepped out of a window, hoping Jae-hwan wouldn't get too overwhelmed. The liquid began to surge like a storm, and when the figure finally emerged, he commented that Jae-hwan seemed on the verge of drowning in his own emotions. A peculiar creature, clad in a suit, remarked that it was a bit late to warn him about the danger, but encouraged him not to be too distressed, considering how well he had managed, being a human and all. Meanwhile, the transparent blood rained down on him like enormous droplets. However, the creature was surprised to observe that the blood didn't touch Jaehwan's body. Instead, it formed a protective shield around him. Witnessing Jaehwan standing unharmed amidst this torrent of blood, the creature noted that he had bounced back faster than anticipated. Jaehwan turned to the creature and asked who it was. In response, the creature explained that they had skipped introductions out of excitement at meeting someone who had reached the 100th floor of the tower. It then revealed itself as the devil, known as Beast Rain, the owner of the Tower of Nightmares that Jaehwan had just conquered. Hearing this, Jaehwan asked if there was more to come after this tower, considering it had seemed like a tutorial. The creature chuckled, complimenting his astuteness, and mentioned that before the main event, there was something it wanted Jaehwan to see. With a snap of its fingers, numerous screens appeared before him. On these screens, Jaehwan witnessed his entire journey, from entering the tower to forming his team and encountering various individuals as they climbed the floors. As he looked at these familiar faces, the devil remarked on their significance and the fact that he wouldn't encounter them again. Jaehwan also relived the memory of battling dragon-like creatures alongside Seal, a fight that had ended tragically with Seal's death, leaving him in tears. Next came the memory of Yunwan's death, which overwhelmed him. After sharing these memories, the devil inquired whether they didn't evoke sadness, anger, and regret. Encouraging him to leave behind these pointless emotions, the devil offered Jaehwan a fresh opportunity, inviting him to replay the game once more. The devil considered it an incredible privilege, similar to what novel heroes experience starting anew with all their memories intact. Jaehwan began to realize that this wasn't the end, and that saving humanity meant more than just reaching the top of the tower. He remembered the initial invitation to the tower, supposedly for humanity's rescue, and it struck him that they'd been deceived from the beginning. No matter what they tried, they couldn't stop the tower's impending disaster. All they could do was try to conquer it. The idea of saving humanity was just wishful thinking. With this in mind, Jaehwan turned to the devil and firmly said that they knew he could never send them back to the past. The devil burst into laughter, mocking Jaehwan for holding on to the idea of going back in time. Then, he dropped a bombshell: nothing in the tower, no matter how powerful, could send anyone back in time. This revelation shocked Jaehwan, who had initially argued that there was a regression stone in the tower capable of such a feat. But then, Jaehwan remembered the words of the ice dragon about the demon dreamstone and realized it referred to the regression stones. The devil confirmed that it wasn't a regression stone but a nightmare stone. People who used it didn't go back in time, they got trapped in a dream created by the stone. The devil had devised the idea for this item on the 77th floor when he noticed a group fixated on going back in time. Jaehwan took some time to process this information and decided to trust whatever he was told. After a while, the devil asked if they should start the main game and sent a notification inviting Jaehwan to join, expecting him to accept. But to the devil's surprise, Jaehwan instantly declined the notification. He declared that the devil had helped him realize the true nature of the tower. Jaehwan believed that he was already trapped in a nightmare created by the tower and refused to stay in it any longer. Instead, he made it clear that he intended to hunt down the devil and keep climbing to the next floor, just as he had been doing. When Jaehwan announced his plan to kill the devil and move on to the next floor, Beast Rain confidently stated that there was nothing beyond the 100th floor, that's where the tower ended. However, Jaehwan remained resolute, refusing to believe the devil. The devil, anxious to convince Jaehwan, tried to reason with him, but Jaehwan responded by swiftly beheading the devil with his sword. With his head detached, the devil asked Jaehwan what he desired, offering anything as a reward for his actions. Jaehwan calmly replied that he didn't desire anything. In response, the devil, as his head began to reappear, asked if Jaehwan didn't want to return to his original world. The devil explained that the tower and its impact on the world were just a dream. This revelation shocked Jaehwan, and screens appeared, showing him what was happening in the real world. He saw people going about their daily lives, looking perfectly normal, and realized that Beast Rain was telling the truth. Meanwhile, Beast Rain laughed at Jaehwan's reaction, saying he seemed to understand his situation. He asked if Jaehwan wasn't relieved to know that nobody had actually died. Then, Beast Rain remembered to show Jaehwan something important and directed his attention to a screen displaying many unconscious patients. As Jae-hwan looked closer, he realized one of them was himself. Beast Rain asked if Jae-hwan was surprised by his unharmed appearance. Beast Rain revealed that even though decades had passed in the tower, only a month had passed in the real world. After showing him the screens, Beast Rain stated that Jae-hwan could never defeat him because the power gap between them was immense, like the difference between humans and dragons. Jae-hwan, feeling a sense of relief, gripped his sword again, declaring that if Beast Rain was like a dragon, he had already hunted one before. He bravely charged toward the devil, sword in hand, fully committed to ending the evil being's life. Sometime later, Jae-hwan, heavily injured, stumbled into Jae's workshop and called out for him. To his surprise, the workshop was covered in thick cobwebs, as if it hadn't been used in a very long time, and Jae was nowhere to be found. Realizing that he couldn't rely on Jae's help, Jae-hwan decided to forge a weapon himself. It had been 72 days since he had confronted Beast Rain, and despite his best efforts, he couldn't land a single blow on the devil. What was even more bewildering was that Beast Rain didn't seem interested in killing him either, almost as if he were playing with him. This strange situation only fueled Jae-hwan's determination to defeat the devil, no matter how long it took. Meanwhile, Beast Rain, watching Jae-hwan closely on his screens, was intrigued by how unique Jae-hwan was. He, as a cultivator, had never seen anything quite like it. Beast Rain explained his process of selecting strong individuals from those who entered the tower, putting them through a tutorial stage, and then helping them grow during the actual tower gameplay. However, Jae-hwan's refusal to move on to the next stage presented a problem for Beast Rain. He considered just killing Jae-hwan within the tower, but that would harm Jae-hwan's soul due to the differences between them, causing problems with the harvesters. So, instead, he decided to carefully nurture Jae-hwan, sell him to a high-ranking devil, and repay his loan for the tower. As he watched Jae-hwan on his monitor, Beast Rain marveled at his uniqueness, even attracting the attention of divine beings who rarely interacted with devils. Yet, he found Jae-hwan's relentless pursuit of victory over him annoying and questioned why Jae-hwan kept resisting his offers to move forward in the game. Realizing that Jae-hwan wasn't going to give up, the devil disappeared with a snap of his fingers, leaving Jae-hwan surprised. After a moment, he reappeared behind Jae-hwan, who reacted by turning quickly and accidentally injuring himself against the wall. Growing increasingly frustrated, Beast Rain held Jae-hwan firmly and demanded to know why he was persistently pursuing a seemingly pointless goal, ignoring the rewards offered. Jae-hwan simply stated that he wanted to defeat the devil and move on to the next level, further frustrating Beast Rain. Seeing the devil's agitation, Jae-hwan smiled, thinking that he had finally pushed Beast Rain to his limit, and expressed his desire to ask a question. Sitting at a table, Beast Rain explained that the universe wasn't confined to a single dimension, a notion Jae-hwan agreed with, mentioning parallel universes and the multiverse on Earth. Beast Rain then went into more detail, revealing the existence of a primary dimensional realm called the Almighty Land, beneath which countless alternate dimensions thrived. Earth, he explained, was just a tiny planet within this complex dimensional system, referred to as the 294th world by their standards. He explained that inside the tower, the walkers used to gain skills and items while working on their status. This helped them adapt to the system of the Almighty Land and gave them a chance to travel to another world. He also mentioned that devils like him played a role in supporting these games. In response, Jae-hwan had asked why he, a devil, was involved in such activities. Intrigued, Beast Rain had then mentioned that he was curious about why Earth was chosen among all the possible alterations for the tower's impact. He wondered why he had been forced to face this fate. He had explained that it seemed like their planet had been chosen by chance, but Jae-hwan had interrupted him, expressing his interest in understanding why a devil was running the tower. This had surprised Beast Rain, who had stared at Jae-hwan. Jae-hwan continued by asking what benefit the devil derived from this kind of work. A bit nervously, Beast Rain had stated that it was like volunteer work for creatures like him. He had added that Jae-hwan didn't seem to believe him, but it was genuinely something that devils enjoyed doing. Beast Rain had gone on to explain that this kind of thing happened on many different planets, where devils watched over the walkers and lived in paradise alongside them. After giving a long-winded explanation and justification, Beast Rain remarked that Jae-hwan must have believed him until now. Jae-hwan had simply glared, considering it all pointless talk. After some time, Jae-hwan sat down in the snowfield, examining his status window. He had noticed that all his skills had reached their maximum level. While drinking a potion to heal his injuries, he realized that there were no more skills to level up. Yet, despite this, he still couldn't defeat Beast Rain. As he lay in the snow, he pondered whether humans could truly be reduced to nothing in the system of this strange world. Suddenly, he had felt something strange and had become surprised, wondering what it was. At that moment, he had started to see fine particles floating in the air, gradually growing larger. Initially, he had considered it a hallucination. However, as he held one of these particles in his hand, it quickly dissipated into the air, forming different shapes. While observing them, Jae-hwan had come to the conclusion that these particles represented the essence of this world, regardless of their form. Out of the blue, he received a message stating that the monarch was ready to support and mentor him, stirring his curiosity. Returning to Beast Rain, he asked whether this monarch was essentially a king, leading to a knowing grin from Beast Rain. It seemed that Jae-hwan had finally developed an interest in this matter. Beast Rain went on to clarify that these monarchs acted as guardians of the Great Land, extending their power and backing to those who successfully completed the game and ventured into the Great Land. Jae-hwan expressed his confusion about the idea of gaining power and support, prompting Beast Rain to provide further clarification. He emphasized that Jae-hwan's choice of which monarch to align with would significantly shape his future. Beast Rain promised to do everything in his power to help Jae-hwan connect with a powerful monarch if he followed his guidance. However, there was a catch. This support depended on Jae-hwan committing to complete the main game. Jae-hwan, after considering this information, couldn't help but compare Beast Rain's persuasive pitch to that of an insurance salesman, which left him feeling a bit embarrassed. Nevertheless, he eventually agreed to follow Beast Rain's advice, with the condition that he would leave after 10 days. 9 days later, while Jae-hwan focused on intense swordsmanship training, Beast Rain watched his progress on a screen with some frustration. He thought Jae-hwan was spending his days on a seemingly pointless pursuit. Although he was becoming impatient, Beast Rain reminded himself that the end was near. He remembered how he had been deceived into buying the tower and, filled with anger, he took it out on the sofa. He blamed these individuals for his frustration. The tower was said to be an antique, a first-generation tower of unknown age, and lacked a feature to forcibly end the tutorial without losing the rewards, a feature that a third-generation tower might have. However, he had chosen the first-generation tower because it was more affordable. So, all he could do was wait for the next day. Finally, the last day arrived. Beast Rain eagerly provided Jae-hwan with all the information about the main game, and Jae-hwan thanked him. The invitation to join the main game reappeared on the screen, and Beast Rain urged Jae-hwan to click the accept button this time, thrilled that the long-awaited day had arrived. To his astonishment, Jae-hwan surprised him by delivering a sudden blow, leaving him utterly bewildered. As Jae-hwan stood there, with Beast Rain's sword piercing his body, he asked what Jae-hwan was up to. Jae-hwan's response was clear: he intended to hunt him down. He immediately attacked again. Jae-hwan had noticed something strange before this. There were shiny particles that made his sword moves feel off, causing discomfort. During this, Beast Rain raised his hand to strike Jae-hwan. Swiftly, Jae-hwan used his sword to cut off Beast Rain's arm. He realized that the odd feeling he'd experienced was a sensation of being alive. But before he could react further, thick steel-like vines burst from the ground, trapping Jae-hwan. While Beast Rain healed his severed arm, he admitted that Jae-hwan was unlike any human he'd seen before. He wished he'd realized this earlier. Jae-hwan, still trapped, questioned Beast Rain about his plans, saying he wouldn't play along without agreeing. Beast Rain acknowledged this and revealed that he'd given up on getting Jae-hwan's consent long ago. He explained that the tower's game was programmed to end automatically after 100 days, a fact that surprised Jae-hwan. Beast Rain explained that his plan was to hold Jae-hwan until those 100 days passed, then have him participate in the main game without resistance. Jae-hwan, with his sword in hand, teased Beast Rain, calling himself the master of teasing in this realm. Jae-hwan went on to reveal astonishing facts about Beast Rain's long life and dark intentions. He disclosed that Beast Rain had lived for 784 years, traveled through 128 worlds, and schemed among various tribes. This revelation left Beast Rain stunned. Jae-hwan also mentioned that Beast Rain had intended to hand him over to a mysterious monarch. Dumbfounded by Jae-hwan's knowledge, Beast Rain demanded to know who Jae-hwan truly was. Jae-hwan smiled and revealed that he was the product Beast Rain had nurtured within the tower for many years. Jae-hwan shattered everything, declaring that he was not a product anymore. Emerging from the wreckage, Jae-hwan charged toward Beast Rain at incredible speed, leaving Beast Rain bewildered. Coming close, Jaehwan struck his formidable sword into Beast Rain's shoulder, causing him intense pain for the first time. As Beast Rain pursued Jaehwan, he couldn't understand why the wound in his shoulder was worsening instead of healing, finding it impossible to comprehend. Looking at Jaehwan's formidable sword, Beast Rain grew increasingly shocked, recognizing it as the overload adapter. Jaehwan revealed that after reaching the tower's 100th floor, he had doubted everything: the tower, the devil's power, and his own human strength. Strangely, in response to his doubts, the world itself began to unravel, and his uncertainties began to fade. He eventually reached a point where he had no more doubts. Saying this, he launched another powerful attack, forcing the devil to step back. Realizing he had no other option, Beast Rain abandoned the time constraints and revealed his true, devilish form. Then, he charged at Jaehwan, declaring he wouldn't hold back and demanding Jaehwan's surrender. As he got closer to Jaehwan, Beast Rain used his sharp claws to harm his face and tear at his body, causing blood to flow. During this, he noted that Jaehwan was impressive but had his limits against a devil like him. In response, thorns sprouted from the ground, piercing Jaehwan's body. He wondered if this was the end as blood dripped from his hands while he gripped the Ice Dragon sword, and the tutorial's countdown reached its final moments. Meanwhile, Beast Rain moved toward him, stating that Jaehwan would have to participate in the main game. But just as he neared Jaehwan, the countdown ended, and a bright light emanated from the sword, knocking Beast Rain off balance. Jaehwan, now on his feet, remembered defeating formidable monsters on lower floors and charged at Beast Rain, determined to defeat him too. Seeing the immense power of the sword, Beast Rain was shocked. The sword began emitting lightning strikes, tearing his body apart and causing him great pain as he fell to the ground. Jaehwan reached out, emphasizing that humans were not to be traded, digitized, or sold. He declared they weren't mere pawns and that they wouldn't follow the script anymore. Instead, he planned to destroy this world, ascend to the next floor, and keep going until he destroyed the entire realm created by beings like Beast Rain. Beast Rain begged him to stop, claiming there was no next level. But Jaehwan remained resolute, citing the cryptic writings he'd found on walls while climbing the tower's floors. He believed these writings were the work of the tower's creator and pointed to them as evidence of the next level's existence, recalling seeing similar signs on various floors. Recalling the signals that had led him to the illusion tree, Jaehwan turned to Beast Rain and asked whether this place was indeed the root of the illusion tree. He noted that if it were, there should be a trunk somewhere. As he gazed up at the ceiling, he thought aloud that he might find a way forward by breaking through it. With conviction, he gripped his sword and shattered the roof, leaving Beast Rain in shock as his tower crumbled. As the ceiling started to cave in, the system swiftly detected the problem, checked for anyone else in the tower, and ended the tutorial session. Sometime later, Jaehwan found himself in a forest-like location and remarked that he had finally reached the next level. While he explored the island, a host of enormous beasts suddenly emerged from the trees, surrounding him as he stood his ground with his sword. In a surprising turn of events, one of the beasts leaped at him, but Jaehwan skillfully dispatched it with a single thrust of his sword, hardly moving from his spot. After dealing with that creature, he turned to face an even larger one behind him. Recognizing that a simple thrust wouldn't work against such a huge monster, Jaehwan tightly grasped his sword and thrusted with all his might, tearing the beast into pieces. After vanquishing all of them, Jaehwan cut off their horns and gathered them, thinking that the monsters on this floor were much weaker compared to the previous ones. While occupied with this task, Jaehwan suddenly heard a voice. He turned to find beings that looked like extraterrestrial creatures, clearly angered by his killing of the beasts. The leader among them issued commands in an unfamiliar code language that left Jaehwan bewildered. Understanding the word horn in their command, Jaehwan asked if they wanted the horns and suggested a deal: he would give them the horns in exchange for information about their location. However, the creatures paid no attention to his offer and rushed toward him at great speed, attempting to attack. Jaehwan managed to dodge their strikes. He warned them that if they tried to attack him again, he would kill them all. Nonetheless, it became evident that they had no intention of stopping. Sighing, Jaehwan decided to eliminate them all. After dealing with the creatures, he approached the leader, who was lying on the brink of death, and asked about their current location. In response, the creature expressed amazement at Jaehwan's strength in the same code language. Growing frustrated, Jaehwan grabbed him by the antennas protruding from his head, causing him to scream, and demanded that he speak in a language he could understand. The creature, in response, bit his own tongue and succumbed, leaving Jaehwan to acknowledge their remarkable willpower, surpassing even his expectations. Looking at the broken antennas in his hand, he created a small mound of sand and placed them inside. After that, he began searching for valuable items that might provide him with the information he sought. As he was exploring, he stumbled upon a small pouch, which turned out to be quite extraordinary. It could hold many items despite its size, almost like a magical inventory. Jaehwan appreciated it, especially because he hadn't been able to use his usual interface system since leaving the tower. Jaehwan decided to put the horns he had collected into the pouch. It made him think about his hopes of using the interface system in other dimensional worlds, like the Almighty Land, which had turned out to be a letdown. He also found various multicolored stones of different shapes, which he discovered were spirit stones that could boost one's spiritual energy. Collecting these stones from all the creatures he had encountered, Jaehwan realized that each of those creatures had one of these valuable stones. Seeing their worth, he stashed them in his backpack. Looking at the dead beasts, he wondered if he should just leave them behind, considering the sheer number of items he had to store. Eventually, he continued his exploration, gathering different weapons, fruits, and other things he could use. While exploring the island, Jaehwan came across a map. Opening it, he found it was a map to the Chaos Illusion Tree, a place he hadn't heard about from the information the devil had given him. Meanwhile, on another part of the island, enormous beasts were battling humans led by a woman. She had a cruel smile as she threw her dagger at one of the beasts, accidentally hitting one of her own group members. After apologizing, she decided to hunt on her own, leaving the group. The injured person was angry at her clumsy actions. Later on, they heard her voice again and turned around, shocked. They saw a gigantic bihorn beast following the woman, realizing she had provoked this formidable creature, putting them in danger. As they contemplated what to do, Jaehwan watched from a distance, noting that the woman appeared to be the strongest among them and wondering about their relationship. At that moment, a woman who had been watching Jaehwan for a while walked up to him. She was curious about his identity because she knew that no one in the Chaos region could easily defeat a bihorn with a simple attack. So, she asked him where he was from. Jaehwan turned to her and asked what Chaos was, which surprised her because she thought everyone knew about it. As the group started to move away, Jaehwan explained that he was just passing through and didn't belong to this place. He also mentioned that he didn't understand the languages spoken in this region. The leader of the group found this strange because it was unusual for a language barrier to exist here. Later on, they brought up the topic of the bihorn's body again, and Jaehwan agreed to let them have it. During their conversation, the woman remained quiet, wondering how he had killed the bihorn so easily without using any special skills. She couldn't use her powers to figure out who he was and concluded that his spirit power was different from that of an adapter. Curious about his identity, she asked him who he was and where he came from. In response, he asked her what chaos was, which frustrated her. She sarcastically asked if he couldn't understand a simple request for an introduction. Jaehwan clarified that he understood but explained that thinking about his past brought up memories of his childhood, school days, and life on Earth. He believed that all those memories had lost meaning when he entered the tower and gained new memories with his comrades. However, those memories vanished when the tutorial ended, and he suspected that even if his comrades were on Earth, they would be strangers because they didn't share those memories. After thinking it over, Jaehwan told the woman that he couldn't remember anything. She got angry and accused him of claiming to have amnesia, but he corrected her, saying he never claimed that. She insisted it didn't matter and asked if he was the mighty of the abyss, leaving him confused. Getting frustrated with her questions, he told her to stop because he had the information he wanted. He reached into his backpack and showed her the ice dragon sword, surprising her. Because it was a spirit weapon. This made her realize that he didn't defeat the bihorn just because he was strong, he had a powerful weapon. At this point, the other members of the group also noticed his spirit weapon and were surprised. Meanwhile, the woman was annoyed with her group for getting involved in her mission and thought she could have completed it on her own. Then, she had an idea and asked Jaehwan if he wanted to hear a proposition. Afterward, she took the time to explain the concept of chaos to him in detail. They also discussed an upcoming party. During their conversation, she revealed a shocking truth: her companions were part of a dangerous clan called the Red Fox. She urged Jaehwan to eliminate them, emphasizing the serious threat they posed. She even mentioned that they might try to harm him, which left him surprised. As time passed, the sky grew darker, and one of the group members suggested staying put for the night. They were concerned that walking in the dark could expose them to dangerous creatures. They all agreed to camp at their current spot, lit a fire, and sat around it to rest. Jae-hwan, lying under a tree, looked up at the shimmering particles in the air. He thought that the village on the map was nearby. While holding one of these glowing specks, Jae-hwan received a notification that he had reached the second stage of awakening. This granted him the ability to hear the thoughts and conversations of those around him. Using this new skill, he overheard the group talking about him. To his disappointment, they didn't think highly of him and saw him as just a monster slayer who relied on his weapon. Hearing their unkind words, Jae-hwan became worried about their true intentions. He figured they would be surprised to learn he had obtained his weapon from the illusion tree's root. He also found it strange that these people were so interested in the equipment from the tower, which he didn't consider very valuable. As he gazed at the starry sky, he started to doubt whether this place held the power he was seeking. Suddenly, the group around the fire got up and began approaching him while he remained calm on the ground. The woman noticed his composure and asked why he was lying down, pointing out that people were coming toward them. She helped him up and suggested using a special sword to fend off the approaching enemies. Unfortunately, Jae-hwan revealed he had lent that sword to someone for inspection. At that moment, the hostile group closed in around him, and their leader expressed his intention to take possession of the coveted sword. The woman countered, stating they couldn't harm Jae-hwan as long as she was with him. The members of the opposing group admitted they had been called to eliminate just 2 people and wanted to do so quickly and return. In response, the woman questioned their willingness to resort to violence and prepared herself for the impending fight, finally revealing her true abilities. As the members of the hostile group charged at them, the woman rushed forward with incredible speed, knocking them to the ground with powerful blows. She also threw a dagger that hit one of them in the forehead, resulting in his death. She declared her anger and threw numerous daggers at the other group members, warning them that they were about to face a terrible fate. Upon realizing that her original intent had been to eliminate them from the very start, the group's leader expressed his regret for not recognizing it when she lured the monsters towards them. Fueled by anger, he demanded to know who had summoned the Shadow Warriors. In response, she asserted that it didn't matter, given their actions had caused the deaths of numerous innocent people, making them targets for many. She then swiftly hurled daggers in their direction. The leader of the opposing group chuckled, stating that the Shadow Warriors wouldn't have been summoned for such weak adversaries. He easily shattered all of her daggers while gripping Jae-hwan's formidable sword. He suspected that she must have received a secret request, one that would lead to her demise at their hands. As she gazed at the sword, she commented on his desire to face her with a spirit weapon. He laughed, assuring her that he had taken all necessary precautions. Suddenly, more figures began to appear around them, all highly skilled adapters numbering at least 40. This revelation left her astonished, while the leader explained that such precautions were essential when facing a shadow warrior and someone capable of slaying a byhorn with a single strike. He regretted having called his master to join the battle if he knew acquiring the spirit weapon would be this straightforward. Suddenly, a colossal hybrid humanoid creature emerged behind them, recognized by the woman as the Black Fox. She questioned his involvement in a minor skirmish, to which the Black Fox responded by calling her the Witch of Massacre. He revealed that over half of the Red Fox clan had assembled to hunt her down, and his clan members charged towards her. Acknowledging the apparent honor, the woman suggested that he wait and watch, secretly uncertain about defeating him in a one-on-one battle since he was a third-stage adapter. Turning to Jae-hwan, she offered her apologies and explained that she wouldn't be able to protect him. She tossed a nightmare stone in his direction, instructing him to take it and flee. Holding the stone, Jae-hwan inquired about its purpose. She informed him that it was a return stone, which he could use to escape to the nearest castle. She clarified that it was her only one and urged him to use it, leaving him perplexed. He came to realize that the stone he held wasn't a magical time travel stone but rather a powerful one for the present. He clenched it tightly, thinking about his friend Yunhwan's tragic end. He couldn't help but wonder if giving Yunhwan this stone instead of a fake one could have saved him. He turned to the woman and asked if she would go back to the past if she could. She replied firmly that it wasn't the time for such thoughts and that she wouldn't want to change her past. She believed she had done her best in life, and if it was her time to die, she'd accept it. To reassure her, he placed his hand on her shoulder and told her she wouldn't die that day. Surprisingly, he drew his sword and quickly attacked their enemies, defeating them one by one as he moved forward. The Black Fox, their leader, tried to empower his group with a special skill, but Jaehwan countered it with his own skill, effortlessly defeating them all. When he reached the Black Fox, he thrust his sword into the creature's claw, causing it immense pain. This left the leader in shock, and Jaehwan, after killing the Black Fox, took his spirit sword. The remaining group members fled. Meanwhile, Jaehwan tightly gripped his sword and used a powerful technique, creating a storm that tore apart the fleeing enemies. The woman was amazed by his overwhelming strength. She had initially thought he was naive when he allowed the group to take the Bihorn corpse, but now she knew he was much stronger than she had assumed. Curious about his identity, she asked who he really was. He playfully suggested she had forgotten and teased her about memory loss. She then asked for the return stone she had given him earlier, but he had lost it, frustrating her. She couldn't understand how he could lose such a valuable item, but he simply walked away. Later, he sat by the fire, finding the surroundings peaceful. The woman continued to search for the return stone, but it was nowhere to be found. Jaehwan told her she already knew his identity, leaving her puzzled. He stated that he was a human, making her wonder if he was joking. As she sat by the fire, Jaehwan asked if she was human, and she confirmed, saying he was almost human too. Jaehwan clenched his fist upon hearing this, and she looked puzzled, trying to figure out what he was thinking. While sitting quietly with him, she thought about whether being human was enough for them. Later, as they walked, she asked if he remembered anything about the Almighty Land before arriving in Chaos, but he didn't. She mentioned that she envied him for losing all his memories. Confused, Jaehwan asked why losing memories was a good thing. She explained that most people in Chaos would envy him because everyone came to Chaos for a specific reason. Jaehwan then asked how she ended up there. She stopped and warned him that knowing the answer would bring deep regret. After a long walk, they arrived at a place called Gorgon Fortress, which she likened to a village. While they approached the fortress, Jaehwan noticed a location resembling the summoning ground on the first floor of the tower and wondered about its purpose. Suddenly, a faint light emerged, revealing countless people pleading for salvation. Jaehwan realized this was the summoning ground for the deceased, while the woman hinted that he might find the answer to her arrival in Chaos. She advised him not to ask that question here and welcomed him to the world of the dead. Curious, Jaehwan asked if those who died in the Almighty Land ended up in Chaos, to which she confirmed, adding that dying in Chaos marked the end, with people becoming nutrients for the illusion tree. Guards from the fortress appeared, handing out clothes and instructing the newcomers to line up for the speech hall. The woman called out to one of them, James, and explained she was just passing by. She requested to be allowed in quickly since they knew her identity. James, recognizing her as Mino, apologized and said they had to check everyone's identification to enter the fortress. She turned to Jaehwan, who admitted he had no identification. Realizing it would be hard for him to enter, she told James she'd forgotten her identification and offered him a horn as a substitute. James loudly announced that her identification was verified and let her in. Then, James turned to Jaehwan, asking for his identification. Jaehwan confessed he had none and asked about the consequences. Mino explained he was in trouble and offered to help him out. James clarified that without proper identification, entry into the fortress was impossible. Jaehwan stood there, leaving Mino worried about his intentions, thinking he might consider harming the guards to get inside. However, she quickly pushed the thought aside. She believed he might be eccentric but would never actually do it. However, as she visualized the entire scenario, doubt began to creep in. Maybe he would actually go through with it. So, she hurriedly stepped in, making up a false story about his identity to let him in. But before she could speak, someone approached from behind, leaving Mino shocked and anxious. When the newcomer appeared, all the soldiers lined up and saluted him. Mino revealed that he was the most famous person in the fortress, Captain Carlton, known for maintaining the cleanest checkpoint in Chaos. Carlton then walked over to James, drawing his spirit sword. Jaehwan inquired if there was a blacksmith capable of handling a sword like his, but the person wasn't sure, while the one under the bridge smiled knowingly. After some time, Mino regained consciousness and was surprised, asking when they had entered the village. Without facing her, Jaehwan remarked that she was finally coming to her senses and suggested she could go on her own, which surprised her. As he began to walk away, Mino started running after him, apologizing for her attempt to leave him at the fortress entrance and asking if he was upset. In response, Jaehwan reassured her, saying that she had already guided him to the castle, which was enough, and that she wouldn't be a hindrance from that point onward. Jaehwan had turned to the woman and informed her that they were different. He had insisted that she should find her own way. After hesitating for a moment, she clenched her teeth and chased after him. She had claimed that he didn't know the place, but he had said he could ask for directions. She had wanted him to ask her, revealing that she knew the area well. Jaehwan had turned to her and had said he was going to find a nightmare, which had confused her. When he had seemed unsure of where to look, Mino had offered to guide him. While they were talking, he had reached into his backpack and had mentioned that some people had business with him. He had faced the people blocking their path. The person who had seen him on the bridge had grinned cruelly. His companions had asked if they were the ones with the valuable sword. Mino had warned them to leave if they didn't want trouble, and they had complained that she talked too much. One of the thugs had gotten angry, while the others had said their brother had a short temper. They had threatened to take the spirit sword forcefully, but Jaehwan had calmly refused to hand it over. The thugs had been surprised by his composure and had urged him to surrender the sword for his own safety. One of them had charged at Mino, but Jaehwan had intervened. He had cut the attacker's arms and had sent him crashing into a wall, stunning the others. As the burly man had lain on the ground, Jaehwan approached the remaining thugs, noting how annoying they were. He had drawn his sword and had challenged them to fight. Enraged, they had rushed him, emphasizing their bond as brothers. Jaehwan had clashed blades with them. After a while, Jaehwan held his transparent blooded spirit sword. Impressed, Mino had asked how he had defeated them with a single thrust. Jaehwan had explained it was the only technique he knew, surprising her. She had mentioned someone she knew who used a single technique but as a slash, not a thrust. Remembering he had missed an earlier attack, Mino had asked if he had miscalculated his strength. Jaehwan had revealed that during the fight with the thugs, he had sensed someone using a stealth technique on the roof, which had bothered him. So, he decided to scare them by causing a small explosion. This revelation had shocked Mino, who had questioned why he had used roof explosions as a scare tactic and had even suggested he give his technique a name, an idea he hadn't liked. Afterward, they started to walk towards the market and soon reached a place called Twilight Dusk. Mino had told Jaehwan that it was a smith founded by a nightmare, and it was also the biggest smith in Gorgon. Just then, someone approached them and asked if they had come to make a request. The person was Naivan, the craftsman of Twilight Dusk, who had told them that it would take a while to fulfill their request if they put it in that day. Hearing that, Mino had asked why the reservations were full, and he had replied that the workshop manager was absent at the moment, and there was only the assistant manager in the shop who was also busy. He stated that if they were looking for something, it might be better for them to buy a ready-made product rather than ordering something new. In the shop, there was a person who pointed at a sword on a table. They said it was made from a four-horned beast's horn, with one final step left to complete it. The people in the shop, likely students of the person talking, asked if they could try to finish it. This person turned out to be Michael Garnard, the assistant manager of the workshop. He asked if they could even make a hole in such a tough sword. Michael held the sword and said that if anyone could make a hole in it, they'd be the assistant manager of Twilight Dusk for a day. All the students tried, but the sword was too tough to pierce. Michael told them their efforts were weak and they couldn't even dent the sword. Naivan, watching from afar, wondered when he'd get to touch a four-horned beast's horn. He noticed Jaehwan had entered the workshop and tried to stop him, but Jaehwan didn't listen. When Jaehwan spoke up, Michael turned to face him. Jaehwan said he wanted to give it a try, making Michael think he was a traveling craftsman. Michael bragged about his skills and warned Jaehwan it wouldn't be easy. However, Jaehwan surprised everyone by easily poking a hole in the sword with his finger. He swung the sword and declared he'd be the assistant manager for a day. But suddenly, the sword started to crack and broke into pieces, leaving everyone shocked and angry. Michael was furious, saying Jaehwan had destroyed an expensive horn. Jaehwan said he had been gentle and apologized. Michael, still angry, asked how they would explain this to the Primordial Universe faction who had ordered the sword. Jaehwan promised to get them a better horn, surprising Michael with a horn from a five-horned beast. Jaehwan then asked if he could use their workshop, and Michael agreed. Meanwhile, Mino left, saying she had somewhere to go. Once she had departed, the workshop was closed, and Michael escorted Jaehwan inside. He let Jaehwan know that, as the temporary manager of the workshop for the day, he had full access to all its resources and personnel. Michael then asked Jaehwan how he had come to possess the horn of a five-horned beast, and Jaehwan explained that he had acquired it by himself. Michael was taken aback and asked if Jaehwan had single-handedly hunted down a five-horned beast, to which Jaehwan confirmed. This left Michael astonished, as he thought that such powerful individuals were exceedingly rare in the world of chaos. Jaehwan, changing the subject, requested Michael's help in crafting a scabbard. Michael was surprised, wondering if Jaehwan intended to use the horn for this purpose. In response, Jaehwan presented a spirit sword and asked for Michael's opinion on its quality. Michael inspected the sword and noted that it resembled an ice dragon sword, though it lacked aesthetic appeal. Nevertheless, he believed that the horn was too valuable to be used on such a weapon and suggested crafting a new sword from it. However, as Michael examined the sword, he sensed a spiritual energy emanating from it and realized it was a spirit weapon housing the soul of an elite being. This puzzled him, and he contemplated that the sword was undergoing a remarkable transformation. He knew that when this transformation was complete, the sword would require a new name since it would have outgrown its original one. Michael, however, hesitated to craft a new weapon since Jaehwan had already damaged the horn. Much to Michael's astonishment, Jaehwan revealed that he possessed another horn, which he promptly retrieved from his backpack. After inspecting the second horn, Michael realized that it also came from a five-horned beast, implying it had 5 horns, an obvious conclusion. Turning back to Jaehwan, Michael asked how he could be of assistance. Jaehwan simply requested that Michael demonstrate his skills in refining materials. Excited by the prospect, Michael inquired whether Jaehwan had a specific shape in mind, but Jaehwan left the creative aspect to him. Michael eagerly accepted the challenge, looking forward to showcasing his craftsmanship. Meanwhile, in the Gorgon castle, the commander relaxed in his office, sipping tea. At the same time, his covert operative reported an incident involving the deaths of some thugs at the hands of an individual named Jaehwan. The operative also mentioned that they had lost their primary target during the operation. In response, Castle Commander Yurin Cheever requested more details about how the thugs had been dispatched. However, the agent admitted uncertainty, as he had unexpectedly lost consciousness while on a rooftop. This raised concerns about potential capture. Given that the assailant had managed to elude detection using the stealth skills of a master-level 3rd stage adapter, the commander deduced that the perpetrator must be at least a 5th stage adapter, adding to the intrigue of the situation. As a result, he gave orders to his agent to increase the force and conduct a thorough search of every corner of the castle to find this individual. The agent promptly followed the instructions. After the agent left the room, the commander winced and let out a sigh. Suddenly, he opened his eyes and noticed his teacup shaking violently. He slammed his hand on the table, remembering his Castellan, and told him to hang on a bit longer. Meanwhile, in a bar, a group of people sat watching a show where the host played a video discussing the most debated topic of the time, the 99th floor solo clear. While watching, the people discussed different scenarios about what might have happened to the person involved. At that moment, one of them shared that the tower had been suspended and suggested that some demon might have been caught cheating, leading to the suspension. The group also talked about the rumor that the demon had run away and abandoned their cultivation duty. They expressed amazement at someone's ability to clear a first-generation tower all by themselves. As they chatted among themselves, the bar's door swung open and Mino entered. Everyone present was taken aback by her beauty, but she paid them no attention and went straight to the counter, taking a seat. At that point, someone approached her, intending to ask her something. However, she quickly turned around and rudely told him to leave. This left the person feeling embarrassed, and he quietly walked away. Sitting there, she became increasingly frustrated, which led her to order a significant number of drinks. After consuming several drinks, she lost control of her senses and began to vent her frustration about Jaehwan in front of Claire, the pub owner, who herself started to feel exasperated. Taking into account Mino's irritation with Jaehwan, Claire asked why she didn't simply distance herself from him. Mino explained that Jaehwan had been a source of great frustration because of his tendency to destroy everything during his fights. She also mentioned that his fighting style showed a disregard for the established rules of their surroundings and a habit of making peculiar statements. Mino recalled an instance during one of his fights when she remarked on his lack of hesitation in using his strength, even though he didn't fully understand the nature of chaos. Jaehwan's response had been a simple assertion that those who hesitated were not truly human. These comments, along with his declaration that he and Mino were fundamentally different, intensified her frustration and made her feel insignificant. She conveyed that while everyone in chaos had faced hardships, Jaehwan somehow emerged and looked down upon her, claiming that she could never understand his motivations. As she continued to vent her frustration, Claire placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, commenting on her immaturity and advising her to avoid getting involved in such situations again. Claire had firmly told Mino not to go near Jaehwan again, warning that it could lead to her own death. This left Mino confused, and she wondered about Claire's intentions. Just then, the doors of the pub swung open, and a dazzling stream of particles surrounded Mino. Out of nowhere, a parrot appeared and handed her a letter from Carlton, the chief of the northern checkpoint. This unexpected message made Mino uneasy as she started to read it. While she was preoccupied with the letter, a voice from behind asked if she was the infamous Witch of Massacre. This startled Mino, and she reached for her dagger. She confirmed her reputation but was then grabbed by the stranger, making her drop her weapon. The stranger, too busy to fight, revealed he needed Mino's help. Meanwhile, in a workshop, a massive five-horned beast appeared, terrifying Michael. Michael, overwhelmed with fear, wondered how he could possibly deal with such a creature. Suddenly, Jaehwan appeared and pulled Michael away, reminding him of their ongoing smelting work. Despite the chaos caused by the rampaging monster nearby, Jaehwan insisted that Michael honor his commitment. Moments ago, after many attempts to shape the horn, Michael grew exhausted and admitted his inability to refine it. Jaehwan disagreed, suggesting the problem lay in perception, not skill. He briefly covered Michael's eyes and stressed the importance of seeing. Confused by this, Michael looked at the horn, which began melting and floating in the air, leaving him in shock. The melted horn transformed into a colossal five-horned beast, astonishing Michael. As the beast wreaked havoc, Michael couldn't believe if it was the real five-horned beast. He regretted his casual approach to refining it, realizing the seriousness of his actions. Feeling like he was in a dream, Michael tried to open a nearby door to wake up. Outside, he was horrified to find his students and workshop laborers turned into eerie skeletons. Trembling with fear and disbelief, they asked if he had already completed the refinement process. This situation pushed him into a trance-like state, leaving his students confused. During this confusion, a voice told Michael that he wasn't allowed to witness this unusual world. These events made him question the existence of such a strange place. Meanwhile, Jaehwan was deeply focused on hunting a monster and crafting weapons from its horns. He pondered why he was in this unfamiliar world. Despite the difficulties, Jaehwan remained determined. He continued his work, extracting body parts from the living monster and skillfully using his forging hammer. While doing so, he wondered why he had been chosen to come to this world. Outside the room, Michael slowly snapped out of his trance and let out a scream. After some time, Michael, looking at Jaehwan who had broken the horn, commented that a regular human trying to gain power equal to a nightmare or surpass natural limits was ultimately futile. He noted that Jaehwan seemed to have aged too much to handle the horn effectively and should have realized this earlier. Michael explained that Jaehwan had originally come to the workshop to meet the manager, who was a nightmare. However, it had been a long time since the manager had left, leaving only Michael, a mere human. Jaehwan, in response, dismissed the importance of his own race, saying that as long as Michael could craft a scabbard, everything was fine, and he encouraged Michael to persist. Despite Jaehwan's encouragement, Michael insisted that he had already made numerous attempts. However, Jaehwan argued that success could still be achieved even after trying 100 million times, which made Michael chuckle. Michael stated that although it might not seem like he was working hard, he had indeed put in a lot of effort. This reminded Jaehwan of his friend Jay, who used to claim he was working diligently while watching Jaehwan. Jay claimed to have mastered all the skills related to blacksmithing and had a 99% success rate in repairing any weapon from the tower. However, he had started feeling like he was running away from the 1% chance of failure rather than toward the 99% chance of success. Drawing on this memory, Jaehwan turned to Michael and acknowledged the tremendous effort Michael had put in. He asked if Michael understood the principle behind the processing skill. Michael responded that the principle of the nightmare's processing skill was one of the original skills that had existed since the beginning. To explain, he likened it to asking how a human could explain the origin of the world. Upon hearing Michael's words, Jaehwan realized that Michael had been using a skill without truly understanding its essence. After a brief silence, Michael suggested that the principle might involve infusing tools with spiritual power and meticulously refining the horn using that power. However, he questioned why other craftsmen couldn't grasp this simple principle. Jae-hwan explained that these craftsmen hadn't properly learned how to use the skill. Hearing this, Michael thought that if the principle behind this skill was so straightforward, his students should be able to at least imitate it or do something similar. Turning to Jae-hwan, Michael asked if he knew the principle behind processing. In response, Jae-hwan said he didn't know it at first, but had figured it out. He brought his finger near the horn, and with a touch, the horn began to melt on its own, leaving everyone astonished. He asked them to take a close look and describe what they saw. They observed particles breaking down and commented on how difficult it must be. Jae-hwan emphasized that their extraordinary efforts unintentionally limited their perspectives and solidified the constraints of the world. He wanted them to understand that if their hard work hadn't led to success, it wasn't their fault, but rather a sign of the world's limitations. Michael felt shocked when he learned something surprising. He remembered how the nightmare he used to work with had always discouraged him from learning these methods. The nightmare insisted that these skills were only for nightmares, not for humans. It kept saying that because of human limitations, Michael could only ever be an apprentice. But Michael didn't give in to those limitations. He believed that with hard work, he could overcome them. So, he asked Jae-hwan what he should do. He wondered if Jae-hwan wanted him to go against the whole world. Jae-hwan replied by saying that the world tricks people into thinking they can't achieve what they truly can. He told Michael that even though he was getting older, he still could fight. Then, Jae-hwan turned to the horn and told them to take a closer look, advising them not to rely on the system but to trust their own eyes. Michael did as he was told and saw Jae-hwan running toward the same beast again. This made Michael realize that Jae-hwan saw a world without skills or interfaces, an honest world with no deception. Michael couldn't help but wonder how someone could live like that unless they were insane. He raised his hammer and struck the horn with force. Sometime later, Jae-hwan emerged from the workshop, saying his work was done and he had to leave. Michael looked at the transformed sword and asked if Jae-hwan had chosen a name for it. Jae-hwan hadn't picked a name, so he let Michael choose one. Michael named the sword Maverick and said there couldn't be a better name for it. All the craftsmen said their goodbyes to Jae-hwan and wished him a safe journey. As he walked away, Michael called out and asked how he looked in the world Jae-hwan saw. Jae-hwan simply said the word human and left without looking back, leaving Michael to wonder if anyone else could truly understand that lonely world. As Jae-hwan walked away from the castle, Mino quietly followed him. Jae-hwan asked her why she was following him, and she asked if he thought her intentions were dark. Jae-hwan questioned her about her plans, and Mino admitted she intended to kill him. Jae-hwan asked her why, and she said she wanted a life of luxury and the soul stone he possessed, which seemed to amuse him. Noticing his lack of genuine emotion, Mino gave Jae-hwan some clothes, explaining that she didn't want to use his things for free and wanted to apologize. She then asked him if he couldn't meet the nightmare and what his plans were. Jae-hwan revealed that Michael had told him how to meet them, and he intended to follow that path and inquire about the tree of imagery to find his way to the depths. Mino asked about his purpose for going there and reaching the depths. She explained what happened to people who returned from the depths when Jae-hwan revealed that he had no intention of returning. She felt shocked by his intentions and grew frustrated. She asked, who gave him the right to do whatever he wants without considering what others think? She noticed that he always did things his way and called him cold and thoughtless. As she looked at the people on the streets, she couldn't understand why Jae-hwan didn't see them as fellow humans. She believed that they were all humans, but not as strong and courageous as him. Jae-hwan remembered how she was willing to sacrifice herself in the present and never return to the past. He also recalled Michael, who was determined to become like nightmares and worked hard for it. Using his ability to read her thoughts, Jae-hwan realized that she was tasked with luring him and threatening the safety of someone dear to her. He looked around and saw people hiding on the opposite sides of the street. He knew that to save the hostage, he had to risk his life, but he found it meaningless because no matter how many times he saved them, the truth remained unchanged. He believed that this world was controlled by the wealthy and those who had sold their souls for money. He thought it would be better to eliminate them and find the nightmare. Just then, Mino stepped forward and took the bag of clothes from him. She said that he didn't seem like a human to her and suggested they part ways. This left Jae-hwan confused, and she declared they would never meet again. As she walked away, Jae-hwan noticed that she did look like a human, while the people observing them sent a message that Mino had betrayed them, and the nightmare had gone to waste. Hearing about the nightmare, Jae-hwan wondered if it was with them. After a while, Mino returned to the pub and opened the door, calling out to her Aunt Claire. However, inside, she was met with a scene of destruction. The pub was in ruins, and a group of armed individuals had captured Claire. Claire told Mino that she might die this time because of her. Janaya, the person in front of her, asked why she was alone and what happened to their deal. Mino remarked that he was more naive than he looked and drew her daggers. She said that the person they wanted couldn't reach this place. She swiftly hurled her daggers at them, revealing that the person they were after had gone to eliminate another target. Janaya, undeterred, used his shadow occult skill to create powerful shadows to fight Mino. He recognized her ability to take on multiple opponents and anticipated witnessing her skill firsthand. However, before the shadows could attack, Mino executed a backflip and threw more daggers at them. In response, Janaya gripped his sword and unleashed a massive wave that knocked Mino to the ground. Approaching her, Janaya said that no one could figure out what was happening inside such a place. He gave her another chance to go and bring Jae-hwan to them. She responded by claiming that they would be pursued by the dark forest. When they accused her of bluffing and pointed out that there were no branches of the dark forest in the fortress of Gorgon, Janaya placed the sickle on Claire's neck. He declared that they wouldn't find out until she and her aunt were completely destroyed. Mino clenched her fists, got back on her feet, and launched a powerful dagger attack using her frozen fencing skill. However, with a single swing of his sword, Janaya shattered all of Mino's daggers into pieces. His malicious laughter filled the air as he expressed his intention to tear her apart personally. Realizing that she had no chance of winning against such a formidable opponent, she remembered Jae-hwan asking her if she would return to the past if given the chance. She smiled, wishing she could go back in time at that moment. Janaya raised his sword to kill her. But just as he brought the sword down towards her, a powerful blow struck him, surprising his comrades. Jae-hwan entered the pub, complaining about this kind of situation. Mino asked why he had come, expecting him to save her. However, to her disappointment, he explained that he had come because the clothes didn't fit him and handed her the packet back. Looking at Jae-hwan, Janaya and his people smiled, assuming he possessed a spirit weapon and had made it easier for them by coming himself. Jae-hwan asked if they were the ones having nightmares and told them to bring the nightmare to that place at that moment. Janaya and his group were surprised and thought Jae-hwan was as crazy as the rumors said. Mino called out to Jae-hwan, warning him that Janaya was a fourth stage adapter. Janaya and his group charged at Jae-hwan, saying they would teach him a lesson. In response, Jae-hwan took out his sword and unleashed a powerful energy wave, leaving them bewildered. When Janaya dodged the attack, Jae-hwan was surprised. Meanwhile, the members of the opposing group were equally astonished and wondered if Jae-hwan was one of the mighty of the abyss. Jae-hwan pondered how Janaya had dodged it, thinking that only the five-horned beast could evade his slight thrust. He wondered if a fourth-stage adapter was on par with that level of power but decided it didn't matter. Jae-hwan prepared to launch another attack. However, before he could do so, Janaya used Claire as a shield and threatened that if he attacked, she wouldn't be safe either. Claire encouraged Jae-hwan to attack without concern for her safety, which prompted Janaya to slap her and tell her to be quiet if she didn't want to get hurt. Witnessing this, Mino reassured Claire that they would save her and then turned to Jae-hwan, asking if he could do it. Jae-hwan, holding his sword, wondered why she was asking him that since he had come for the nightmare, not to rescue them. He believed he needed to eliminate anyone in his way, be it the enemy or the hostage. However, Mino stopped him, reminding him that she was a human. Jae-hwan recalled the bustling market and Mino herself, and he suddenly halted in his steps. Some folks in front of him taunted him, daring him to strike if he could. With his unique insight, Jae-hwan noticed they all looked like skeletons, except for Claire. She appeared completely human and urged Jae-hwan to attack. After a brief moment of contemplation, Jae-hwan raised his sword high and unleashed a mighty surge of energy, shattering the roof of the pub and touching the sky. Outside, Carlton, his guards, and onlookers were left bewildered, wondering about the strange occurrence. After observing the energy wave for a while, Carlton grasped the situation and ordered his guards to take action. This energy wave shattered the soundproof barrier above the pub, making Janaya and his people anxious. Shortly after, Carlton entered the pub and instructed his guards to encircle the place. He approached Jae-hwan, inquiring about the commotion. Jae-hwan remarked that Carlton had arrived at the perfect moment, asserting that the people they were fighting against were violating the laws Carlton cherished so dearly. Pointing towards Janaya, Jae-hwan admitted he didn't know all the details but claimed that this person had broken the Gorgon criminal law. He exposed Janaya's plan to use the bar as a base and collaborate with the Nightmare to wreak havoc on the world. This prompted Mino to question whether Jae-hwan had similar intentions. In response, Carlton cited the Gorgon criminal law, stating that anyone involved in property destruction and the abduction of residents could be arrested without a warrant. Upon hearing Carlton's announcement, Janaya addressed his comrades, deciding it was time to retreat. In response, Carlton deployed his silver restraints and questioned whether it would be so easy for them to escape. He stated that he would bind them all with his chains and summoned a large axe, declaring that further resistance would be futile. At that moment, Janaya charged at Carlton with his sword, but Carlton managed to block it with his axe. Despite exerting tremendous force, Janaya couldn't break through the defense and continued his efforts until his own sword began to crack. Seeing this, he leaped into the air to launch an attack, but before he could do so, Carlton used his silver restraints to tie up Janaya's hand and pulled him down, causing him to crash to the ground. Lying there, utterly drained of energy, Janaya finally surrendered, and Carlton remarked that it was a wise choice, proceeding to bind both of Janaya's hands. Janaya then threw a ball towards Carlton, which left him bewildered. As the ball hit the ground, it started emitting poisonous fumes that quickly spread throughout the pub. Seeing the toxic fumes filling the pub, Janaya commented that they hadn't anticipated needing to use a black cloud in this place. Just then, one of his group members, dragging an unconscious comrade, revealed that he had inhaled the black cloud because he hadn't worn his mask properly. Suddenly, Janaya heard a voice chastising them for using the black cloud without the clan leader's permission. He turned to see Seorang, the clan elder, who inquired about Mino's strength. Janaya explained that they hadn't used it because of Mino but because the silver restraint had been employed, which surprised Seorang. Gazing at the ruined pub, Seorang asked if Carlton was inside, and they confirmed it. He chuckled, suggesting that Carlton's condition might worsen due to inhaling the black cloud. Just then, he spotted Jae-hwan emerging from the pub, carrying Mino and appearing completely unharmed. He turned to Janaya, inquiring about his identity. As Jae-hwan gazed at Seorang perched on a tree branch, he channeled his sword's energy toward the tree, causing it to crumble. This left them astonished, wondering how he had left the pub unscathed by the ominous black cloud. Suddenly, one of them observed that they'd never seen an emerald bug without antennas, and even if he were one, there was no way he could perform such a feat. After ensuring Mino's safety at a distant spot, Jae-hwan turned his attention to them, suspecting they might be the cleanup crew. He tightened his grip on his sword, finding them incredibly vexing. Raising his sword high and then slamming it into the ground with all his might, he reluctantly used a skill he had initially avoided using. In that moment, a strong five-horned Garnak materialized from the sword, emitting powerful waves of energy toward the enemies. Overwhelmed by the sheer force, they scattered in a frantic bid to save themselves. But their efforts were in vain, as the energy waves swiftly overtook them, tearing their bodies apart and ending their lives instantly. Jae-hwan advanced through the lifeless bodies, ultimately reaching Janaya and Seorang, who sat on the ground. Seorang, perplexed by Jae-hwan's abilities, stood up and fled, instructing his companions to handle Jae-hwan. Janaya, sitting alone amidst the corpses of his comrades, felt frustration at the dire turn of events. Jae-hwan, realizing there was no way out for him, approached Janaya, demanding to know where they had hidden the nightmare. In response, Janaya asserted that survival held no purpose, for once Jae-hwan discovered the truth, they would wish for a swifter demise, leaving Jae-hwan puzzled about whom he referred to. Accepting his inevitable fate, Janaya produced a specter crystal and consumed it, much to Jae-hwan's surprise. He recalled a conversation with Mino, during which she explained that those in chaos used such crystals not as narcotics but as medicine to reduce their spiritual corruption. Failure to do so would transform them into dreaded ghouls. As a result of consuming the specter crystal, Janaya underwent a monstrous transformation, becoming a fearsome, grotesque creature with large teeth, numerous tongues, and a formidable physique. His eyes glinted with ferocity as he began slaughtering anyone who crossed his path, sowing terror and chaos throughout the village. Having undergone this transformation, Janaya pondered the worth of dignity in the world and why he had been so afraid when he could now revel in his newfound freedom. With intense determination in his eyes, he turned towards Jae-hwan, believing he could now vanquish him with his newfound power. To his astonishment, Jae-hwan stood his ground confidently, clutching his sword, and declared that a human could not exist in a world like this. Gazing at Janaya, Jae-hwan wondered about the true nature of this enigmatic figure, realizing that even his keen sense of suspicion could not unveil his essence. Jae-hwan didn't care. He raised his sword and aimed its power at Janaya, causing him intense pain. The energy wave shattered Janaya's body, and it started raining suddenly. In his agony, Janaya remembered playing in the rain as a child, reflecting on this moment as he fell apart, marking his end. Jae-hwan stared at Janaya's lifeless body, pondering his character. After a while, he walked on, hoping to find someone who knew the location of the nightmare, and left the area. Back at the pub, Jae-hwan found Mino unconscious. Carlton, lying on the ground, realized they needed to alert the inner fortress. Jae-hwan noticed Mino's body turning black and she asked him to kill her before she turned into a monster. Jae-hwan finally realized that Mino was human and remembered he couldn't use comprehend on her. He pulled out his sword, thinking emotions had no place where he was headed. But Claire stopped him, telling him to wait. She believed it might not be too late, despite the guards trying to restrain her, urging her to reach the medical facility. Ignoring her own injuries, Claire insisted Jae-hwan not kill Mino and wait a bit longer. In the medical camp, the physicians assessed Mino's condition, hoping her transformation could be halted. Jae-hwan stood nearby, awaiting their update. Suddenly, an emergency notice announced an invasion of small dead creatures in the fortress. Panic swept through the people as they scrambled to evacuate, while authorities urged them to leave quickly. A child asked a guard where to go, but the guard turned out to be one of the deadly monsters. The child watched in shock as the monster attacked him with its tentacles, and more monsters emerged. A group of powerful warriors leaped from the rooftops, wielding weapons to battle the monsters. They defeated all the creatures. Jae-hwan wondered if the leader was the one Mino had mentioned. Claire turned to him and reminded him of his promise to reject the rules of this place, judge the world by his standards, and define humanity in his own way. She said she understood people like him very well and had seen someone like him before. She put her hand on Mino's forehead and said that the people who live and adapt to this place aren't foolish, they do it because they don't have any other choice. Jae-hwan disagreed, saying it wasn't about choice but about lacking courage. Confused, Claire asked what kind of courage he meant. Jae-hwan explained it was the courage to surpass limitations and find a better definition. Claire remarked that he seemed like someone who pursued such things, but she lacked the courage to understand it. She looked at him and stated that she knew one thing: he was very dangerous. She told him he needed to leave because people found hope in him, and if he stayed, they would fall into despair, reminding him of the deaths of his comrades in the tower. Jae-hwan remembered Mino's request never to give up on this world and pondered his decision. Meanwhile, standing by Carlton's bed as he experienced the same condition, James urged the physician to use all available medicine to treat him. They complied, grinding a horned beast's horn into a paste and feeding it to Carlton. Unfortunately, it had no effect, causing them to worry. Jae-hwan asked James if there was any chance Carlton could revert to being human after death. Frustrated, James admitted he didn't know, leaving Jae-hwan feeling desperate. Jae-hwan shook Carlton and asked him to wake up, saying he had a question. James was shocked and angry, but to their surprise, Carlton opened his eyes and asked Jae-hwan to kill him, claiming he was the only one who could do it. Confused, Jae-hwan questioned why he wouldn't ask to be saved instead. Carlton referred to the law of Gorgon, explaining that corrupt souls had to be destroyed immediately. Jae-hwan admired his loyalty, thinking that a few more people like him could have prevented him from being trapped in the tower for 40 years. They received an alert that Carlton's soul corruption had reached 94%, and deadification was about to begin. Just then, an individual who had killed the dead monsters entered the camp, Captain Jahir of the Anti-Dead Extermination Squad. James was surprised, and Jahir declared that according to the laws of Gorgon, he would kill Carlton and another individual. Announcing his intention to kill Carlton and another person, Jahir raised his sword. However, before he could act, Jae-hwan stepped in and took the sword, saying he had some questions for Carlton and wouldn't allow Jahir to harm him. Jae-hwan's ability to block the attack with his bare hands surprised Jahir. Jahir then admitted he didn't know who Jae-hwan was but explained that killing someone like Carlton, a Stage 5 adapter, would cause a disaster they wanted to prevent. Jae-hwan asked if there was an alternative, revealing a 5-horned beast's horn, which shocked everyone. A physician confirmed that the horn could bring Carlton back to normal. He crushed the horn with his bare hands, surprising them even more. The crushed horn was given to Carlton and Mino, which stopped Carlton's spiritual corruption from worsening, bringing relief. However, the horn accelerated Mino's deadification due to her low stamina. They received a warning that her soul corruption had reached 95% and deadification was imminent. Jahir approached Mino, but Claire asked them to call Chunghyo, who could perform a dead slash to remove the corruption. Jaehwan was confused, so Claire explained the dead slash removed only the corruption. Jahir said Chunghyo was busy and couldn't be called for something trivial. Jaehwan insisted on killing Mino because she had requested it. Jahir told him to step aside, but Jaehwan grabbed his sword, activating a skill. Claire pleaded with him not to do it, but Jaehwan remained still, placing the sword on Mino's heart. As bright particles appeared, Jaehwan was enveloped in a bright light and transported to an empty space. There, he saw an old man beside Mino, offering help. The old man was shocked to see Jaehwan and asked how he entered their world. He also noted that someone with such a noble soul shouldn't have such a narrow mind, referring to Jaehwan's sword. Meanwhile, Jaehwan attempted to use his questioning skill on the elderly man but couldn't succeed. He began to wonder if this old man caused Mino's soul corruption. Thinking that defeating the old man might save Mino, Jaehwan charged towards him. They clashed swords, surprising each other with their strong defenses. Both of them were astonished by their ability to block powerful attacks. Suddenly, the old man's sword started to crack, revealing him to everyone in the camp. The old man turned to Jaehwan in anger, asking how he could destroy his world and demanding to know who he was. Gripping his cracked sword tightly, it shattered into countless pieces, leaving the old man sad and angry, as it was made from a trihorn's horn. Jaehwan remained silent, convinced that it wasn't him but the old man who broke the sword. The elderly person turned out to be Chunghyo, the divine physician of the castle. Jahir approached him and asked why he was there, to which Chunghyo replied that someone was about to die, regardless of his position as the fortress master. This surprised Jahir and his subordinate. Chunghyo then turned to Jaehwan, stating that he had completely disrupted his dead slash, a move only possible with a sword made from a trihorn or something better. He noticed Jaehwan's pentahorn sword and was amazed. He asked where Jaehwan got such an incredible sword. Jaehwan asked if Chunghyo could save Mino if he lent him the sword. Chunghyo agreed, and Jaehwan handed it over. Chunghyo thought Jaehwan must be very confident in his abilities to trust a stranger with his sword. Chunghyo held the sword and remarked that it was like its owner. Everyone in the camp watched with curiosity. Chunghyo suggested they see what the sword could do. A bright light spread throughout the camp, making Jaehwan wonder if it was another illusion. But he soon realized it was similar to how he perceived things using his questioning skill. He wondered if the old man had a similar ability. The sword slipped from the old man's grasp, and he collapsed, leaving Jaehwan perplexed. Chunghyo explained that he lacked spiritual energy due to the castellan. Suddenly, the ground trembled, signaling the world's collapse around them. Realizing the treatment had failed, Chunghyo apologized to Jaehwan and expressed his embarrassment. Jaehwan stepped forward and took back his sword. Chunghyo commented that it was foolish to try mimicking the dead slash without fully integrating into his world. Jaehwan admitted he couldn't perform the slash but was willing to try. He tightly held the sword, and Chunghyo warned him that dead slashing wasn't something just anyone could do. Jaehwan remembered Claire's words. She had said his actions weren't acts of bravery but recklessness. So, he told Chunghyo to hush and placed his sword on the ground. It was the first time in his life he had used his sword to save someone. Hearing this, Chunghyo was surprised, and Jaehwan began to recall Mino's appearance, sketching it on the floor. Jaehwan remembered every detail of Mino's face, personality, and expression. He made a complete sketch of her on the floor but felt like something was missing. After a moment of thought, he added a mole under her eye, completing her face. As soon as he finished the sketch, they were transported back to the real world, where Jaehwan noticed that Mino's condition had greatly improved. Seeing Mino's corruption level dropping and the deadification process stopping, Jahir was amazed. Chunghyo noticed that Jaehwan seemed less narrow-minded and asked who he was. Remembering the technique he used, Chunghyo asked where he had learned it. Jahir turned to Chunghyo and asked if Jaehwan had really used something like a dead slash. Chunghyo confirmed it and explained that the dead slash wasn't a skill, which is why adapters couldn't learn it. They all realized that Jaehwan was not an adapter but an awakener, just like Chunghyo. Awakeners were rare individuals who gained immense power by rejecting adaptation, capable of altering the balance of power in the chaotic world. Jahir believed that because Jaehwan was an awakener like Chunghyo, he could use the dead slash. However, Chunghyo insisted they still didn't know Jaehwan's true identity. Jahir reminded Chunghyo that he had said if there was another person who could use the dead slash, they might be able to save the Castellan. Chunghyo stayed silent, and Jahir emphasized that saving the Castellan was their top priority. Suddenly, someone arrived at the camp, claiming permission from the inner castle and instructing them to step aside. Jahir recognized him as the Dark Shadow Captain. They wondered why these people, seemingly unrelated to the dead extermination, were there. Instead of addressing the group, the captain approached Jaehwan and knelt before him, referring to him as the envoy of the Green Purus. When he got up, he asked Jaehwan to come with him to the inner castle, leaving Jahir and Chunghyo shocked. As they gazed at Jaehwan, they questioned whether he truly was the envoy of the Green Purus. After some time, they reached the inner castle, and the Dark Shadow Captain, along with Jahir, took Jaehwan to meet Yurin. Yurin introduced himself as the commander of the castle, remarking that they had finally met. He then got straight to the point. After that, he came to the main topic and asked if Jaehwan was really the envoy of the Green Purus. Jaehwan replied that he wasn't, which left the Dark Shadow Captain shocked. Yurin, on the other hand, said he expected this answer. Chunghyo argued that the Spectre Crystal proved the identity of Green Purus clan members and asked Jaehwan where he got them if he wasn't part of their clan. Jaehwan took one of the crystals and said he picked them up, which made them wonder what happened to the crystal's original owners. Jaehwan revealed they were all dead, making them question who would dare harm members of one of the 5 noble clans of the Great Land. Without fear, Jaehwan boldly admitted that he had killed them all, leaving them shocked. Yurin, however, asked him why he did it, and Jaehwan explained that they had attacked him first and tried to take his horns, so he had to defend himself. Yurin remarked that the Green Purus clan was known for being greedy for materials and seemed to understand why Jaehwan had done what he did. After a moment, he turned to Jaehwan and asked for more details about what happened after he came to Chaos. Jaehwan explained that he had ended up in Chaos by chance after getting spirit stones from the Emerald Bug clan and entering the fortress. He got caught up in an incident, met the Divine Physician, and learned about the dead slash only after encountering it. Yurin assured Jaehwan that he believed him. Chunghyo questioned whether Yurin really thought Jaehwan's story was true, and Yurin confirmed his trust, leading Chunghyo to comment that Yurin had gone insane. Yurin explained that to gain someone else's trust, you first need to trust that person. Then, he asked Jaehwan if the body he possessed was a living one. This surprised Jaehwan, as he recalled refusing to join the main game and leaving the tower by destroying it. Jaehwan realized that the illusion tree had mistaken him for a dead person and sent him to Chaos, while his physical body might still be on Earth. He asked Yurin how he knew about this. Yurin repeated Jaehwan's claim of getting caught up in something and entering Chaos by chance, pointing out that no one would describe their own death as Jaehwan did. He then asked if Jaehwan didn't want to reveal his identity because of a potential threat, but Jaehwan disagreed. Yurin then admitted that he owed Jaehwan an apology. He explained that for the past 4 days, his team had been secretly keeping tabs on Jaehwan, and Jaehwan acknowledged that he was aware of it. Yurin commented that Jaehwan was stronger than they had anticipated, which made monitoring him quite challenging. Afterward, Yurin opened some computer windows in front of him, mentioning that they had gathered valuable information during their surveillance. He said that he would now share Jaehwan's threat level, his power level, and the extent of the damage he had caused in recent days. While Yurin was explaining, Chunghyo interrupted, calling Jaehwan a crazy person. Jaehwan remained silent, and Yurin acknowledged that some might see him as a hero and others as crazy. He explained that individuals like Jaehwan were often referred to as protagonists. Yurin mentioned that protagonists had a distinctive trait: they were famous. However, Yurin believed that Jaehwan was not famous at all, mainly because someone had been concealing his information and there seemed to be a hostile force working against him. Yurin thought this was why Jaehwan had faced difficulties during the identification process, triggering memories of that particular day for Jaehwan. Yurin said that Jaehwan was the protagonist being chased by a powerful force that had followed him into Chaos. This surprised Jaehwan, who thought it might be the person known as the Monarch of Pitch Darkness. He wondered how strong these monarchs were. Yurin assured Jaehwan that they wouldn't ask about his identity or make him compensate for damages. Instead, they offered him protection. Jaehwan asked if Gorgon Fortress could stand against the 12 monarchs of the Almighty Land. Yuren confirmed that the 12 monarchs were indeed the ones chasing him, and it might be one of them. Yuren thought it was great, as the monarchs wouldn't be able to meddle in chaos matters. Jaehwan asked what they wanted from him in return. Yuren explained they only needed him to save the fortress master. 2 hours later, as they descended the stairs to a basement, the person leading Jaehwan and Chunghyo mentioned that Carlton and Mino were recovering in the treatment center. They asked if they should take them to the training ground instead of the VIP room. Chunghyo suggested they determine who was better between his slashing and Jaehwan's thrusting. He mentioned that Jaehwan had cleared the Tower of Masters, surprising Jaehwan. Jaehwan asked Chunghyo if he knew anything about it, and Chunghyo nodded as they stopped in front of a room. Chunghyo proposed that if Jaehwan defeated him, he would answer all his questions. However, he believed Jaehwan couldn't win. After some time passed, Jaehwan was unharmed while Chunghyo crashed into the floor. Chunghyo suggested they restart the match, claiming he hadn't used his ultimate technique yet. Jaehwan grew bored of hearing the same thing repeatedly. Chunghyo asked Jaehwan's age, revealing he was 60, while Chunghyo claimed to be 1,000 years old. Jaehwan remarked that Chunghyo's slashing appeared to have only 10 years of practice. This angered Chunghyo, who jumped up from the hole, imbued his sword with powerful energy, and charged at Jaehwan. Jaehwan took out his sword, and an intense battle between the two began. As their swords clashed, a strong burst of energy surrounded them during their intense fight. Chunghyo struck Jaehwan with great force, sending him backward. Even though Jaehwan had used a basic move, he felt surprised by the impact. Meanwhile, Chunghyo asked about the name of Jaehwan's technique, finding it very effective. Jaehwan revealed it was called the normal stab, which made Chunghyo think it sounded too plain for such a powerful move. Chunghyo suggested that the name made it seem like there was an even stronger technique. In response, Jaehwan gripped his sword tightly and hinted at an even more formidable technique. Hearing this, Chunghyo was shocked and asked what it was. Jaehwan charged at him with an aura reminiscent of the ultimate Chaos King, causing Chunghyo to remember the fear of facing such power and feel anxious, wondering if he could even defend himself. He feared that Jaehwan's attack might destroy the entire Gorgon castle. Jaehwan announced his intent to attack, but Chunghyo, fearing the destruction, admitted defeat. Meanwhile, in the 5th region, the Steel region, a person ordered their subordinate to provide details about the Pitch Black Monarch's actions. The subordinate revealed that the Pitch Black Monarch was in contact with chaos. This person, Hyoyu, the Steel Monarch, questioned why the monarch was involved with chaos when they were supposed to avoid such interference. The subordinate explained that the situation was complex and showed Hyoyu a video of Jaehwan. Hyoyu recognized the video that had been circulating and asked how it related to their discussion, noting that it was rumored to be fake. The subordinate revealed that Jaehwan was the product the Pitch Black Monarch intended to contract. Hearing this, Hyoyu inquired about Jaehwan's whereabouts. The subordinate explained that after refusing to complete the tutorial, Jaehwan had broken through the tower's roof and disappeared into chaos. Hyoyu found it unbelievable and assumed that someone on the 100th floor must have been watching him. However, the subordinate revealed that Jaehwan had killed those watching him, leaving Hyoyu shocked. After some thought, Hyoyu asked if the 9th region of the Almighty Land truly had connections with chaos, and the subordinate confirmed it, saying it had been recently uncovered. She explained that the Pitch Black Monarch had been interfering with chaos for a long time, and some sects in the 9th region had been in regular contact with the Pitch Black Monarch. Curious about what the Pitch Black Monarch was up to, Hyoyu instructed his subordinate to send a notice so he could travel to chaos. She asked if he planned to interfere with chaos, to which Hyoyu replied that he just wanted to observe and understand the situation. He then told her to send 10 elite Gold 1 rank warriors and Hayoung, and she did as he asked. After she left, Hyoyu wondered how Chunghyo was doing, thinking that he might have lived longer if he hadn't been so hot-headed. Meanwhile, in the Gorgon castle, Chunghyo pleaded with Jaehwan to stop and clung to his sword, saying he couldn't let him proceed. Jaehwan told him to get down, assuring him that he understood. Chunghyo got off the sword and questioned how Jaehwan could possess such incredible power after only a few stabs over 40 years. Jaehwan revealed that he had practiced stabbing about 10 billion times, leaving Chunghyo astonished. He asked if Jaehwan had stabbed 8 times a second without a break, and Jaehwan explained that he could stab up to 100 times a second. Sitting down near Chunghyo, Jaehwan asked why he thought stabbing was limited to using a sword and extended his hand, releasing shiny particles. Changhyo recognized the sharp and foreign energy emanating from Jaehwan and realized it was his hostility and intent to reshape the world. The shiny particles transformed into small spikes that pierced Changhyo's fingers, and Jaehwan explained that this was his version of stabbing. Changhyo couldn't believe it and realized that Jaehwan had become a stabbing expert, repeatedly reshaping the world. Jaehwan then showed Changhyo a contract they had written before their duel, stating that the loser must grant the winner's wish. He began reading the contract aloud to remind Changhyo of his promise, which frustrated him. Worried that he might be used as a slave, Changhyo asked what Jaehwan wanted. Jaehwan clarified that he only wanted honest answers to his questions, and Changhyo agreed. Before starting the questions, Jaehwan suggested they take a walk around the castle. During their walk, Jaehwan asked about the Master's Tower. Changhyo explained that these towers, ranging from F to S rank, were created by master craftsmen, and only a few managed to reach S rank as apprentices. The special towers related to cultivation were known as Master Towers. Jaehwan inquired why such towers were created, and Changhyo admitted he didn't know the exact reason but mentioned that awakeners who cleared these towers kept appearing. Jaehwan asked if Changhyo was from one of the Master's Towers, and Changhyo confirmed that he came from Master Melville's fourth tower. He said it was a tower known as Moby Dick Worldwide, or a giant white whale used to appear on the first floor, constantly chasing people. He recalled it being a disaster back then when many martial masters died. He considered it a miracle to have cleared such a dangerous tower. Changhyo asked which tower Jaehwan had cleared, and he revealed it was Mulaka's tower. Changhyo was surprised, remarking that it was a tough task to clear Mulaka's tower. Jaehwan asked if Changhyo knew Mulak, and Changhyo confirmed, revealing they used to travel together, leaving Jaehwan surprised. Jaehwan inquired if it was true. Changhyo said it was a long story and suggested they go for a walk outside. They left the castle, strolled through the streets, and had dinner. Seeing Claire selling food on the street because her pub was destroyed, Changhyo mentioned that her stall would serve as an open-air street stall for the time being. Looking at the summoning chamber ahead, Changhyo explained that it was a place where exhausted souls from the Almighty Land's war found peace. He revealed that after being released, everyone could finally live normal lives and cherish peace, putting aside their weapons. While they discussed this, they suddenly noticed two people fighting behind them. Jaehwan thought they were just drunkards and took a sip of his drink, finding it tasteless. Changhyo revealed they weren't actually drunk but were pretending to be, as in the chaos, people didn't age, get hungry, or get drunk. However, this made them crave the opposite. They started acting as if they were living a real life, needing to eat to survive. One day, a group of people who wanted something new emerged, gathering others to rediscover real life. They embarked on an expedition called the Abyss Expedition. Jaehwan was surprised and asked why they were heading to the Abyss of all places. Changhyo explained they were searching for the fruit of resurrection there. According to him, those were the fruits hanging on the branches of the illusion tree at the end of the abyss. Jaehwan asked if a dead person could really be brought back to life upon hearing this. Changhyo agreed, saying that the only way to revive the dead was by eating the fruit of the resurrection. He revealed that the Abyss Expedition was formed to find that fruit. Changhyo explained that during the expedition, Mulak, who was the captain, approached him. Mulak had achieved an incomplete awakening without giving up his emotions, which was unusual. Mulak commented on how tough it must be for Changhyo, who threw his sword in frustration. However, Mulak dodged it and asked why Changhyo was going to the abyss when they usually stayed in rooms and built towers. Mulak mentioned that he had nothing to say about it and that apologizing on behalf of all the people who built towers would be pointless. This revelation shocked Changhyo. Mulak stated that the reason he was going to the illusion tree and the abyss was the tower that ended all cultivation. He returned the sword to Changhyo and said that was why he joined the expedition. Jaehwan asked if the expedition was successful, and Changhyo explained that he only made it to the entrance and believed that Mulak reached the top of the illusion tree because the fruits of resurrection began to fall. Jaehwan wondered why Changhyo was still in chaos, and then Claire approached, correcting Changhyo's account. She revealed that the expedition failed after obtaining the fruits. Changhyo shared that on their way back to chaos, the monarchs and patriarchs of the Almighty Land attacked them. They chose to fight, but they were no match for the powerful monarchs and faction leaders. The fruit of resurrection was stolen from them, and the monarchs continued to use the fruits to revive themselves for the past 900 years. Changhyo also told Jaehwan about the Resurrection Palace, where the monarchs took turns reviving following a predetermined order. Jae-hwan realized that the people of chaos were lethargic because they knew they could never obtain the fruit of resurrection. He wanted to ask Chung-hyo something about Mulak but found him asleep. Claire revealed that Chung-hyo was truly drunk after pretending to be drunk for 1,000 years. She mentioned that Mulak was never seen again after the expedition. James then approached Jae-hwan, thanking him for helping their captain survive and telling him to enter Gorgon through the North Gate in the future without revealing his identity. As James left, Jahir appeared while gasping for air, warning them of trouble ahead.